Good afternoon. Glad to see you. Since we launched the new generation VoxStack Series Analog Wireless Gateway last year, we received so many feedback from from our distributors and customers. The most concerned question is, what's the difference between the new version VoxStack Series Gateway and the old version? So today we will hold a webinar training to answer your question. On the whole, these two pictures show the old version and the new version VoxStack Series Gateway product list. Compared to Generation 1, Generation 2 has a new wireless gateway model, which supports 4G band and LTE standard, and an analog gateway model, which supports high-density channels. What needs to be pointed out is that the VoxStack Series Wireless Analog Gateway use the same chassis. This means you can insert the new version module and the control board into the old chassis if you need. We will discuss the specific calculation later. In the chassis rear panel, there are three kinds of buses, which include power bus, Ethernet bus, and the USB bus. In the VS series gateway, the USB bus is not in use until Generation 2. So the difference between the VoxStack series wireless or analog gateway V1 and V2 can be attributed to the difference between the new and the old version of the switchboard and the module board. So next, we will compare the switchboard V1 and the control board V2. The biggest difference between them is the Coreboard, which integrates CPU, RAM, flash, and the analog or wireless gateway system. Besides, on the back of the control board, adds a USB hub chip. Let me show you the topology graph of these two version switchboard. We can see that the Generation 1 only use Ethernet bus for communication. In contrast, the control board V2 has a core board for processing operation and a USB hub for communication compared with switchboard V1. And then we will compare two versions of the module board. Look at the VS GWM 800 series analog gateway module and the VS GWM 400 series wireless gateway modules. Each module runs an independent gateway system inside, and every module has its own IP. Each module can be configured in the standalone mode or to be managed in the cluster mode. The module and the switchboard communicate via the Ethernet bus. The switchboard worked as a network switch. Below are the upgraded VS GWM 820 series analog gateway modules and the VS GWM 420 series wireless gateway modules. The new generation modules add a USB bus for connecting the USB hub chip on the control board. These modules work like USB devices. All modules are controlled by the unique core board with the owning system and IP, and they can be unifiedly managed without clustering. Having said all this, let's illustrate by examples. Now we will analyze a typical installation topology graph. As you can see, in the first case, there is a VSGW 2120 chassis. The old analog module VS GWM 800 series and older wireless module, GWM 400 series, are mixed in the chassis. Because every module has its own IP address and system, different types of gateway module can be inserted into one chassis. At this time, the switchboard worked as a network switch, and the users can access each module's IP address and make simple and convenient configuration via web UI. Let's see the next scenario. We still use the VSGW 2120 chassis, while mixing the old version VSGWM 800S and VSGWM 800O analog module. The old version VSGWM 400W wireless module, and the new version VSGWM 420 series wireless module. Yes, the old version and the new version module board can be mixed in the chassis. We can see the right-hand topology graph. Control board consists of Ethernet switch, USB hub, and the core board. The core board communicates with Ethernet switch via the Ethernet bus, and with the USB hub via the USB bus. As we explained it just now, the old version module and the switchboard communicate via the Ethernet bus as before. We can access the module by its own IP, which is corresponded with the slot. And the new version module is managed by the gateway system installed on the core board via the USB hub. Can you understand? At the final, we will show you an error case. In this case, we insert both the new version analog modules and the wireless modules. While they cannot work well, we only have one core board in the VoxStack Series Gateway V2, which is on the control board. You can choose only one gateway system, either wireless gateway system or analog gateway system. You can use the new version module to build a hybrid gateway. That's all. If you have any question, please put forward in the chat board.
Hello, this is Tim from OpenVox. Now I will answer your question. About the first question, why do you use USB port instead Ethernet? I think you have some misunderstanding about the V2 version. In our V2 generation 2, we add USB bus based on the V1 version. That means in V2 we have 3 buses: power bus, USB bus, and Ethernet bus. And V1 only have power bus and Ethernet bus. USB bus is an additional bus, not instead It's an add-on. Okay, now about the error case. You can see our module boards are version 2. That means it's our new generation board, and this board only have USB bus. They do not have the Coreboard. That means they are USB devices. And this is the Coreboard. But you can see we have two kinds of interface, the analog interface and the wireless interface. But we can only install one system, either wireless system or analog system. If you install the wireless system, that means you can use only board 5 and board 2. And board 4 and board 3, they cannot be recognized. And if you install the analog system, these two wireless boards will be ignored. About the error case, do you have any more questions? About why we change the, why we add a USB bus. It's about performance and high density. In our generation 1, the hardware is based on the ARM architecture and is kind of weak, and it cannot handle more concurrent cores. But now we have, in our new generation, we add a Coreboard with 4 cores Intel CPU, and it can handle about 100 concurrent cores. That means the performance is very, very strong. So with the new Coreboard, Intel Coreboard, we can manage high density channels like 44 channel wireless gateway and even 40 channel analog gateway and 88 analog channel gateway. That's why we add USB bus. Okay, I will explain the difference between V1 and V2. As you can see, this is the topology of V1. As you can see, in board 1 is a switch board. That means it's a access switch like a network switch. And the other board connect to this switch with Ethernet bus. And each board has its own CPU, RAM, flash. That means it's a complete individual system, and each board has its own IP address. So there are 5 boards. That means you will have 5 systems and you will have 5 IP address. So it's kind of complex. Complex to manage all the 5 boards, right? You have 5 IP to manage 5 boards. It's not easy. Now we go to the V2. As you can see, the board 1 is a core board. It's based on the switchboard. We add a USB hub, and we add a core board of 4 cores Intel CPU core board. So the whole device share the same system, the same IP, and the other modules, that means other 7 modules, they are only USB devices. They have low CPU, low RAM, low flash. They are only USB devices. They connect to the core board with USB buses. So we have only one system to manage so many channels, so many boards. So it's very easy to have a high density, a lot of channels, and it's very easy to manage. Do you have more questions about the difference? About insert V2 cards in V1 gateway, it will work. As you can see, in this picture, you can see there are V1 modules and V2 modules. If you want to insert the V2 cards into V1 gateway, you need to change the control board. That means you need to replace the control board. Then you can use V2 cards and V1 modules in the same case. If you want to use V2 cards with V1 core board, it will not work because there's no core board. So you have to change the core board to new generation. About this question, only one IP can handle all 3G or LTE cards. Yes, in our V2 gateway, we can insert GSM, 3G, and LTE cards in the same case. About the switchboard and the core board, in our V1 generation, the 1600 chase, we use the switchboard next the left side, and the 2120 chase, we have another switchboard. But now in our V2 generation, we can use the same core board. They will be compatible with both 1600 and 2120 chassis. They can use the same core board in V2 generation. Yes, in our V2 generation, the WCDMA module is the same UC15 with the V1 generation. They share the same chip. About the HDMI port on control board. This picture is our development board in our production. We will remove this interface. We will remove the HDMI interface. What if we have V1 core and the card of both V1 and V2? The only thing you need to do is replace the switchboard to the core board V2. You need to change the board on slot 0. uh, about the connector, as you can see, the V1 and V2 share the same chassis because they, as you can see the left side, the USB bus, it remained, but it's not in use. So in our V2, we use the USB bus. So we can use the same chassis. About this webinar training, we will record the whole meeting and send you link to we will upload the video to the YouTube and send you the link to you can check the video with more details. About the hybrid gateway. If you want to mix wireless card and analog card in the same chase, you can only use V2 cards, V2 cards and the V1 cards in the same chase. You cannot use V2 wireless and V2 analog in the same chase, but you can use V1 cards and the V2, one of the V2 cards in the same chase. In totally, that means except you use V2 analog and V2 wireless cards, you can mix the As you can see in this error case, this is the only situation you cannot do. That means you cannot mix V2 analog cut and V2 wireless cut. You can do others except this situation. For example, V1 analog and V2 wireless is okay. V1 analog and V2 analog is okay. And V1 analog and V1 wireless is okay. No problem. I will repeat one more time about this error case, why they cannot mix together. As you can see, there is only one Coreboard. That means there is only one system, either wireless system or analog system. So one system can only handle one kind of interface. They cannot handle both. That's software limitation. For now, we cannot handle two kind of interface in the same system. Understand? As you can see, in our V2 wireless gateway, we can support GSM module, WCDMA module, and LTE module. We can support three kinds of modules. But in our V1, we only support GSM and WCDMA. We support only two modules in V1 generation. About the UCP, as you can see, there are so many modules you can use in the UCP. The V1 cards and the V2 cards can work good in our UCP solution. The difference between the VoxStack gateway and the UCP platform is the Mayboard. And as you can see, the Mayboard as you can see in this picture, the Mayboard, they do not take up the slot 0. The slot 0 is there for the switchboard or coreboard. So the gateway it still can still work. There is nothing to do with the Mayboard. The Mayboard is work individually with the gateway system. So no matter you use V1 gateway or V2 gateway, you can still insert the Mayboard and the hard disk board inside. It doesn't matter. About the UCP topology, we will start another webinar training in the future. It will be not long time. The hard disk use SATA bus, not USB bus. Okay, SATA bus. Okay, any more questions about the gateway? One more thing. In our new shipment, we only provide the V2 coreboard as default. The V1 coreboard is EOL. That means we will ship this coreboard without the CPU module as default, no matter V1 and V2. We will ship this board, but the CPU board is not along. About the VoLTE, it will work on our LTE gateway, but sound quality, there is no big change because the sample rate is limited in the hardware. From the LTE module to the asterisk, the sample rate is limited. So we cannot provide we cannot provide HD core. Hello. You can see we have list all the combination in this picture. With switchboard V2, we have you can use there are 10 combinations, except the last one. The other 9 is okay. Do you have any questions about the compilation? About the LTE data for internet access? Yes, it's on our agenda, but I think it will be not so soon. We still focus on our new gateway module, the small 1 port, 2 port, 4 port, 8 port wireless gateway. About the end of life for the V1 gateway, if the market needs such kind of product, I think we will try to make another replacement for the V1 module cards. That means we will try to find another chip to replace the current V1 card. It's there on the plan, but it's not ready. About the V1 card and about the mixing. In our future, we have 2 solutions to make it work. One solution is to find a new chip to replace older V1 cards. And another solution is software solution. We will try to build a hybrid gateway system that can handle USB analog card and the USB wireless card in same system. That's a software solution, but it's still not developed.